trying to stay hot. Play action. That's caught. Tate makes a move and walks in. Touchdown, Detroit.
I want you. I want you. I want to hear from you. Hit me up on Twitter, email me, snail mail. You see me in person. I want to see and hear and talk to the person that, despite the record, despite worrying about Sheldon White and Jim Caldwell staying, I want to see that person after that game. I want to see them after this game tell me that they were disappointed, that they did not enjoy, which ended up being an absolute laugher on national television. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it's 3 in a row. It was the laugher. It was a very fun game. This is the Hindsight 20 podcast. I am your host, Jerry Mallory, as always, brought to you by the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. Of course, we've got to talk about this game, and perhaps you're doing some Black Friday shopping. You know, this is coming out Friday. Maybe you've had all the turkey and stuffing and all that good stuff, and now you got to get your microwave. Now you got to get your 4K television. Perhaps you're waiting until sometime in the weekend or maybe that Monday. Whenever you're listening to this, I want to thank you for listening, and we're going to set the table and just have fun with this one, okay? And when I said I want you, that's like a little shout out because Rocky, which is a really good series, has a new movie coming out. Creed, Apollo Creed's son is being portrayed by Michael B. Jordan. I just remember the Rocky movie, where Apollo Creed points at Rocky. I want you. And that's what I want. I'm calling out those fans that are disappointed that we're winning. Those that were saying that in our 2-game winning streak, how we were losing by winning. I'm calling you out. I want you to be honest. Sit there and tell me that you did not enjoy that win. I mean, if you're a Lions fan and we can look at all the peripheral things that a win or loss can mean, at the end of the day, we love the team, we love football, and 9 times out of 10, we want them to win. We want to see our players play good because that's good for the team. This is a little bit of a different situation. I get it. But the way that game went down, being successful in all 3 phases, dominating the Philadelphia Eagles, I want you. I want you, if you got the guts to show your face, to come out on Twitter, sit here and say, no, not if you're upset about them winning, because a lot of you will say that either way. They shouldn't have won. I want you to come out and admit while that game was going on and say you weren't enjoying it. I want you. I want that fan that thinks these wins will ultimately keep Caldwell and keep Sheldon White. And I get it, because it might. I want you to admit that during the game, not after when we're analyzing everything, during that game, I want you to come out and admit and say that you weren't enjoying it. I don't think anyone will, because I don't think anyone did. It was one of those games. I mean, we look at the 3-game win streak and all 4 games. This was the one that was the laugher. That's what we hadn't had yet. The first game against Chicago was an overtime thriller. A Lambeau Field was the creation of lavender and garlic. It's the campaign while watching a Lions game because your nerves and your blood pressure is just going through the roof. And then last week was a little bit closer in the score, but it wasn't the laugher. It wasn't the blowout. It wasn't the complete annihilation like we had this Thanksgiving. It's not all sunshine and roses, guys, but this is not going to be a 45-minute podcast just like, doing a parade for the Lions. Okay, we get it. They're still 4-7. We have plenty to talk about, but I just wanted to, as I'm watching this game and enjoying it so much, I'm like thinking, man, those people that don't want them to win because of the draft pick and this and that, and we've talked about it, ad nauseum on this podcast. It's no way they're not enjoying this. So I just wanted to start off with that. But let's set the table. First and foremost, this is part of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. It's premiere. We're getting bigger and bigger and better and better. You're going to hear a show 6 days out the week. Sometimes you'll get 7 or 8 shows, special interviews. You name it, it's here. DetroitSportsPodcast.com. If you have Apple, Android, there's options for you too. For those on Apple, go to iTunes, subscribe, Detroit Sports Podcast, and we're right there. For Android, I've told you once, I'll tell you again, I like the Podbay application. So go ahead and use that, and you'll get all of your Detroit Sports Podcast goodness when it comes out. Not just me, but the whole crew. Now, this podcast today. Of course, we'll be talking about the game. We're going to be talking about Caldwell, an interesting question. And, if we keep winning, every time we win, it is like an audition, and it is like a court case for Caldwell. So we'll have to revisit things, especially after a win. So we're going to do that. We're going to talk about Caldwell. We're going to play a clip from him. One of the first podcasts I did, I think it may have been the first one, actually, after the London game. We played a soundbite. It was of Stafford, and it was of Caldwell after the loss. And I had the little clown music going on, complete disrespect, but you know what? They deserved it. We're going to give a listen to Stafford and Caldwell this week because I try to be fair. When you do good, I'm going to give you credit. When you do bad, I'm going to call you out. The way they've played the last few weeks, they deserve the credit. So we'll hear some sound clips from them after the game. We're going to get to your questions, of course. Ernie Accorsi now is joining the whole Ford and Wood crew. He's going to be the NFL guy, the mind. We'll be talking about him, some of his successes, and why I think personally it's a good fit. Of course, we'll be looking forward to what should be just an amazing night Thursday coming up, Thursday night football against the Green Bay Packers. And I'm going to give you a rooting guide. I know last week, or it wasn't even last week, last Monday, I went there and I started doing the whole, if we go 9-7, and now it's gaining steam. People are talking about, man, okay, this team needs to go here, that team. I'm going to give you a rooting guide. Pride of Detroit, which I do videos on, we had been known for doing this when the Lions were close to a playoff spot last year, years previous. Rooting guide is simple. Looking at the week ahead, based on where you're standing, based on who you need to climb ahead of, I'll tell you, if you want the Lions to even have that shot of making the playoffs, I'll tell you who you want to root for and who you want to root against. And so that's pretty much how we're going to do that. So let's talk about this game. I mean, offense, just everything clicked, man. And it was beautiful. This is the type of offense that, we haven't seen really. I mean, the Chicago game was good. We scored 34 points. But it wasn't this efficient. I think this is the best we've seen the offense since week 1 of last year when we had the home opener Monday Night Football against the Giants. We kind of just had our way with them. Stafford was amazing. And yes, I get it. Philadelphia has struggled. But there's been times in the past where the Lions this year and last year went up against a bad defense. And so it was kind of like a mediocre to bad offense in the Lions versus a mediocre to bad defense in whatever team it was. And time in and time out, maybe the Lions can kind of force their will on a bad defense and put up some points and get some yards. It didn't happen. Usually the bad defense kind of outshine our bad to mediocre offense. Not the case today. I mean, we could have put up more points. And a lot of times when you see 45 points in a game, it's because of at least one defensive touchdown or one special teams touchdown. And that was not the case. This was all offense. We did get a turnover in our territory, which helped us quite a bit. But this was all offense scoring the points. We could have scored more. I mean, we just had our way with this team. And so you just love seeing it, okay? We're not going to sit here and, when you got radio or when you're writing or a podcast, you try not to go too far one way. You want to have balance. And I try to do that too, but I'm not going to try to nitpick and find little things. Of course, you want guys to hold on to the ball. Okay, fine. Golden Tate had a drop. Calvin Johnson, Eric Ebron. I think Ebron had one. I'm doing this right after I just left Ford Field just an hour or so ago. And so I didn't get a chance to watch the game over. And when you're in there and you're in the crowd and it's a lot going on, it was a crazy day at Ford Field today. Let me just tell you, I am a peaceful individual. I'm there in the same spot every week and I get along with people, but it wasn't the most peaceful situation for Jerry Mallory this week. I'll just say that you had some people with some liquid courage and it didn't get out of hand, but it was just like some situations. Let's just say that. And so I'm saying that to say there may have been a moment or two where I was slightly distracted maybe. And so if I say Eric Ebron dropped a pass and he didn't, don't kill me this week. I'm coming straight from the game and I'm doing this podcast, didn't get to watch it. And like I said, it was a time or two where I was a little bit distracted due to the people I was surrounded by in a few situations. But I'm not going to go on and on trying to find and nitpick little things. Like I said, maybe a drop or two here or there. They gave up a couple of sacks, but by and large, the offense was great. And I do recall, if I do recall correctly, Stafford had his best statistical game when you're talking about quarterback rating. I'm sure the QBR is through the roof. I'm sure Pro Football Focus is going to be through the roof. I mean, we just got it done, okay? Everyone looked good. It's like Jim Bob Cooter is, and I got to give him props. You know, it's like he's playing to the strengths of the players. He's not trying to pigeonhole the players into this rigid scheme like that Joe Lombardi tried to do, trying to make someone out to be who they aren't. Theoretic is great at catching the ball. He's one of the leading running backs in terms of receiving, receptions, and reception yards. So Cooter says, hey, we're going to throw him the ball a lot. Joique Bell is more of the power runner. Let's run him up the middle. Amir Abdullah is good and shifty. Let's run misdirections. It's not overthinking it. And he's not trying to force players to be something that they aren't, a la the zone blocking scheme when you have an offensive line that their strength is being maulers. So props to Jim Bob. It seems as though he's trying to, simply put, go with what he has and make it work. And that's generally what the good coordinators and the good coaches do. You assemble a group of guys. You do have a vision, but depending on what you're dealt with, maybe there's an injury and someone else comes in that doesn't have the same strength. You have to be flexible. And I think we're seeing flexibility. And again, the right side of the offensive line, not having Lucas or Waddle, just seems to be better. And I still think Michael Ola is just pedestrian at best. But when you have two guys that are beneath pedestrian, I don't have a dictionary in front of me. I don't have a synonym book, but whatever is the opposite of pedestrian, and what would that be, like extraterrestrial? Well, they're certainly not out of this world, but you get my point. You got guys that are way below average. You bring in a guy that's average or maybe slightly below an Ola, and then the offensive line just seems to get better. So just props. The defense as well. I mean, Ziggy now tied with J.J. Watt. It's funny, man. I got to give props to Ziggy because when he was drafted, I was not happy with the pick. In fact, with SB Nation, I was in New York. I was covering the draft, Lions-centric, but just covering the NFL draft as a whole. And the first video I did when he was drafted was 3 reasons why I am worried about the Ezekiel Ansah pick. I didn't say he'd be a bust, but it was 3 reasons why I was worried. It was the fact that he was raw, but he was 24 years old. A lot older, coming into the league. The comparisons of JPP, in my opinion, didn't hold weight because JPP was only 20. Just Jason Pierre-Paul, the defensive end from the New York Giants. I looked at the competition that he faced at BYU, the age. I just wasn't crazy about the pick, and I felt like there were other guys that could have been drafted there. I looked at D. Milner, Chance Warmack, Jarvis Jones, bigger names. They played at bigger schools. So I was not a big fan of the Ziggy Ansah pick. Well, lo and behold, man, the last statement that I made that night, and I kept making the statement because people were getting on me. No, Ziggy's going to be good. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, sorry, it's just an opinion. If I'm wrong, it won't be the first or last time. But I would always end it when I said something about Ziggy. I would say, prove me wrong. I'm worried because of this. I'm worried because of that. So I think it might not be the best pick, but prove me wrong. Of course, he doesn't have to prove anything to me. He has no idea. I can smack him upside the head and he would turn around and not know who I was. I mean, he would probably grab me and throw me across the street. But the point is, he doesn't have to prove anything to me. But the statement was pretty much, hey, I would love if you are not my prediction of being possibly a bust. And he's certainly so far and beyond that Pro Bowl, the accolades, and now he's tied with J.J. Watt. Now, Watt has a game to play still, and, there's a good chance he'll get a sack or 2. Bottom line, I just want to give love for Ziggy, love for Calvin with the 3 touchdowns, Golden Tate walking in. It was just a great performance by everybody. And so to give a player of the game, it's difficult. I've cheated the last 2 weeks. I would name multiple people. I'm not going to do that this week. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it to Stafford because of the stats. He is the quarterback. The offense kind of lives and dies with him, and he was on the mark. He wasn't perfect, but he was as close to it as you want. 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. Early in the game, he was mobile, extending drives. I believe one of those runs was on third down. They got a first down. So, props to Stafford. He got the job done. A game where so many people could have qualified for player of the game. We're giving it to Matt Stafford. And at this time, let's listen to him. This is post-game, some of the comments that Stafford had to say after, which was just a phenomenal game by him and his team.
I think we got through the first quarter without him even having a catch, and I was kind of sitting there going, man, we got to get 81 the ball, and Jim Bob dialed up some plays for him, and he got open, made some big-time catches. The one right before the half, I missed him on the first two. He got open on both those, and, I threw two not great balls, and then, the last one, third time's the charm, I guess. I'll give Jim Bob credit. He called a short, slant route, kind of all slants kind of thing, and he said, screw that, let's go be aggressive. And he goes 4 verticals and gave me 4 verticals, and I was fired up for it. I loved it. The way we were going today, I knew it was going to be a long one, for the defense, so it was nice. It starts with those guys up front. They give us time, and we really ran the ball well, too. So they do that, it's going to be fun. He's a really talented player. Really, all 3 of our backs had good days today. Joey had a chance to have a really big one, if we connect on that first one down the sideline, but he had a nice couple runs after catches on some screens. Theo made some guys look silly. Amir, did a great job too. So I thought all 3 of our backs did a really nice job today. Jim Bob and I have a good relationship. He's a smart, guy. He communicates well with the guys on our offense. He's young in this job, but he's not afraid. He's aggressive, and that's fun. That rubs off on guys when a guy's aggressive and trusts us as players to go out and make good decisions. Hey, you call that play in the end of the half, I throw a pick, everybody's not happy. You call that play and you score a touchdown, then, his trust in us builds and vice versa. Thanksgiving football was always a big deal to me and my family, so it's really fun to play on Thanksgiving. It's my 7th one, and it's a blast. It's a whole lot more fun when you win, and when you win convincingly like we did today, it makes it extra sweet, so it's nice.
All right, props to Stafford. 2 things I want to point out. One was kind of minor. People make statements. They're kind of like throwaway statements sometimes. He says that his family has always cared about Thanksgiving football. Well, keep in mind, Stafford is from Highland Park, not Michigan, Highland Park, Texas. And that's Dallas Cowboy country. So, yes, as you know, the Cowboys play Thanksgiving, every Thanksgiving like us. So it is kind of cool. And I thought back to say, man, this guy, he's admitted to be a huge Aikman fan coming up. Yeah, he's always had football and Thanksgiving as a part of his life. Now for him to have 7 of them as a player himself for the Detroit Lions is pretty big. Now, the one point I want to talk about, and then we're going to get into a question about Jim Caldwell, is the accolades that he was giving Jim Bob Cooter. To me, they were accolades to Cooter, and it was kind of like a diss to the former guy, Mr. Lombardi, Mr. Joseph Lombardi, who's no longer employed. A few things that he said. The first thing he said, the guy is smart. I don't think he's saying per se that Lombardi was not smart, but remember the whole fiasco of Lombardi supposedly saying Stafford couldn't grasp an offense, yada, yada, yada. But the thing that really stuck out for me was he said that Cooter trusts them. He trusts them to make plays, and he allows them to kind of open the playbook up. We know when Lombardi and Caldwell came in, their whole thing was we have to fix Stafford. He throws all these interceptions. We have to fix him. And we saw it in the play calling, trying to make him a game manager. Dude's not a game manager. And when you try to make him a game manager, what happens is you won't get these high peak type games of 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And then the other thing that kind of sucked was you made him a game manager, but he still started turning the ball over. You have to let players play. And you do have to trust your players. And I think when he said that Cooter trusts them to make the plays and allow them to, go up vertical, that was a contrast to what we saw when Lombardi was here. Lombardi did not trust Stafford. And the statement that he made, Stafford, today, kind of makes me believe that Lombardi questioned his intelligence, questioned his decision-making, which, of course, Stafford, he did throw a lot of interceptions under Linehan. However, he had some good years, too. And so Cooter is letting him play. Cooter is letting him, I know I keep saying Cooter, man, that sounds really bad. Jim Bob, that doesn't sound much better, but Jim Bob is letting him play. He's trusting not just Stafford, but the whole, unit on offense. Cooter unit, man, I gotta really clean this thing up. This is a PG show. Seriously, though, he's letting them do their thing. He's trusting the guys, and so far, it's panning out. Now, the first game with Jim Bob was, they're heading to London. It's Kansas City, everything going on, and we didn't see much. The last two games, or 2 games after that, the offense didn't explode, but it did look better. And today, it was like the coronation. Everything just kind of fell into place. Now, we have Telly here. Telly's got a question. We're going to mix this up today. We're going to get to a question right now. It's about our head coach. And after I answer the question to the best of my ability, we'll play a soundbite from Jim Caldwell.
At NoteFro904 asks on Twitter, ready to give Caldwell some credit for this possible turnaround?
That's a pretty good question. And thanks as always for leaving those on Twitter. I can always be found Jerry Mallory NFL, at Jerry Mallory NFL on Twitter. Yes, to answer it, my confidence in Caldwell is increasing. And I just think that's only natural. We can fight and say, the past and different things like that. And all those things are true. And I still probably do want to see a replacement. However, you have to give them credit. This is the same team that went 1-7. So many organizations, so many times in the past, teams would absolutely mail it in. Even here, we've seen, teams just kind of falter and just implode, but they haven't. And you have to look at your leaders. And I've questioned Caldwell's leadership before. I've questioned Stafford's. I've questioned Calvin's. And, I have no problem saying when I'm wrong. And I'm not saying 100% either way because we still have a lot of season to go. But you have to give him credit. And my confidence in him is growing. Do I want him to still be the coach? No. But if I'm doing a percentage, my percentage and being okay with him staying increases. Now, the other thing we have to keep in mind, I still think there'll be a new GM. You bring in Ernie Accorsi. Rod Wood already said they would prefer to have a GM with experience. Yes, Sheldon White will be a candidate, but ultimately, I think there will be a new guy. The new guy might look at this team, especially if we win 7, 8, 9 games and say, I don't mind rolling with Caldwell. Another thing you have to keep in mind, too, is who's available. When this offseason comes, maybe John Harbaugh is ousted in Baltimore, or you really like Chuck Pagano, but maybe none of these guys are. And the new GM has to decide between Caldwell, who already has a system, it seemed like his coordinators are okay, and they had this rally at the end, versus a new guy. I'm just going to trust in the GM. I really hope it's a different GM. If he says, I'm going to trust in Caldwell, give him a year, the more we win, the more comfortable I would be with that decision. Let's listen to Jim Caldwell. He had some comments about the game, which was, like I said, a laugher, man, against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Probably as as complete a victory we've had around here. And I think all the way across the board, the guys played well. I think the offense was clicking pretty well. Besides, we got off to a little bit of a slow start because we just had a couple of penalties and that kind of stuff the first drive. But beyond that, I thought they moved the ball well. Ran it decently. Matthew had a big day. Calvin had a big day. We had a number of guys that performed very, very well. To hold that team to 68 yards rushing, another team under 100 yards, is a real tribute to the way the guys are playing up front, the way our linebackers are running to the ball, and the way our secondary is supporting the run. We're getting a better sense of, what we're looking for from them, and I just think they're executing better. What a lot of teams do, they double him, and for good reason, I think. From time to time, they'll single up on him, but he can create some problems. And when you have to double him, then that leaves someone else, Ebron or one of our tight ends, or maybe inside slot receiver with a single coverage at Golden, or Calvin one-on-one on the outside. They have to decide what they're going to do with the number of players that they have deploying and still rush the passer. So when he's really effective, I think he's another guy that kind of just forces a team to look at us a little differently. This is an unusual day. This is not a typical day. And most games in this league are decided by, a touchdown or less, and that's the norm. And so this is not a typical day in that regard. But when you do have a day like this, you certainly feel good about it. But it doesn't last very long. It's pretty fleeting.
There's your coach. For him being known as a bad game manager, for all of the issues that we supposedly have with him, I just want to give him credit for this win. And I want to give him credit for the turnaround. A team that could have completely abandoned him and just kind of started figuring out off-season plans and going to Bahamas and all of that. No, they've rallied around him, and he is showing that he is a good leader of men. I don't think his game managing is the best, but there's several aspects to being a good coach. One of them is your ability to lead, for a group of guys to buy into your system. And from that standpoint, I think this season, especially if we rip off a few more wins, is showing that he is capable of doing just that. All right, guys, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Mr. Ernie Accorsi, why I feel as though this is a good move in light of the other possible NFL consultants we could have used. We'll be talking about the Green Bay Packers. And yes, I'm delving even deeper into this whole playoff 9-7. I'm going to give you a rooting guide. Stay right there. Jerry Mallory here for the Hindsight 20 podcast. Listen, let's do some business. Your ad can be placed right here. This is the time of year where people are spending money. They're all festive and whatnot. What better opportunity than to have your business promoted, because the Detroit Sports Podcast, we're ever growing. The Hindsight 20 podcast is ever growing. And so you can make a little extra cash and you can support this show and the network. Hindsight 20 podcast at gmail.com. Your ad can be placed right here. Like I said, let's do a little business. Perfect time of year to generate that, because people are trying to spend some of that money. Well, if they're going to spend some of that money, let them use it with your business. All right, guys, we're back on the Hindsight 20. I want to thank you for staying. It's time for the third and fourth quarter. As mentioned, we're going to talk about Mr. Ernie Accorsi. Now, we realize the situation. The GM search is starting. The initial stages are there. And for the longest, we knew that Rod Wood and the Fords would be a part of this, but they would need some help. And there are a lot of options that they could use. The NFL Advisory Board, a random search committee. There was all these rumors. Well, now it's finalized. We know Ernie Accorsi is a member of the Detroit Lions. He's on the payroll. And so let me tell you why I am pleased with him. Now, first off, if you're looking at some of the other options, I think he does not quite have that horse in the race like some of the other guys. You look at the advisory board, you got guys like Bill Polian. Now, Bill Polian has a son that's trying to become a GM. The same with Mr. Wolf. He has Elliot Wolf. Ron Wolf has his son. Then there's Bill Parcells. His apprentice, the guy he mentored, is Sheldon White, GM Detroit Lions on an interim basis. Even Tony Dungy, who is very good friends and has a good working and personal relationship with Jim Caldwell. See, all of those guys, if you were to choose one of them, their opinion could be slightly slanted. They've got family members and apprentices and old workmates. And so it seems as though Accorsi doesn't really have a horse in this race. And so from that standpoint, and I would have been okay ultimately, because all those guys are good NFL minds, and no doubt they would pick several candidates. But hey, when you got a guy that doesn't have that attachment, you know, in my opinion, there isn't any taint to what he says. You know, what if Mr. Polian really wants his son to be that candidate? So he mentions him, and he mentions 2 or 3 other guys that probably won't beat his son out. See, with Accorsi, he could have an agenda too, but the likelihood of him having that agenda, having that horse in the race like these other guys, is that much lower. So I'm very pleased. Now, Ernie Accorsi has been a GM in many places. I just want to talk about his stint as GM with the New York Giants, because that was most recent. I'm not going back to the Baltimore Colts and all these other teams from years ago. You know, if those were his only accomplishments, I would say, well, he's a little bit out of touch. But that's not the case, because you've got the Giants. Now with the Giants, he was there up until 2007. Now, I'm going to give him credit because they ended up going to the Super Bowl in 2008. He was the GM. By and large, the vast majority of those players were players he brought in. They also went to the Super Bowl in 2000, where he had been the GM for a few years as well. He's got some good hits. I mean, you look at the O.C. Umenyiora pick, you know, Chris Snee, Justin Tuck, Matthias Kiwanaku, Brandon Jacobs. I mean, he's found really good players, and his organization, you know, they haven't been up there with like the Packers and the Steelers and the Patriots, maybe the Ravens, but like right after those 4 or 5 teams, right there is the Giants. Love them, hate them, or whatever. You look at it, they're always right there in the race for the NFC East. at Super Bowls. They've won 2 Super Bowls. They went to 2 basically when he was the GM. So I'm pleased with that. Some people will look at the Phillip Rivers trade. He drafted Rivers and traded to get Eli. You can argue what you want. Eli Manning is a multiple Super Bowl winning guy. So I do feel good about that we're bringing in someone. It's a football mind. You just couldn't leave it to the Fords and Wood. Some people thought that they were going to just go with that. I'm like, listen, no. They're going to have a consultant. It's Ernie Accorsi. He's had some success, most notably with the New York Giants. And like I said, he does not have doesn't have the immediate horse in the race in terms of a family member or this apprentice. And so I think his opinion will have as less taint as possible. It won't be any conniving or it could be the other way too. Maybe Polian's like, man, I don't really like the Lions organization. I'm not going to recommend this to my son. Or maybe, Ron Wolf is like, dude, Elliot, baby boy, I don't want you going to the Lions. So I'm not going to really hype up my boy. Either way, having a relative and a horse in a race could just lead the possibility for sneaky, sly, and mischievous things. So my stamp of approval is for Ernie Accorsi, and hopefully, he brings us 2 or 3 good candidates, and it all pans out. Now, it's time to talk, once again, playoffs. I know, I'm doing it again. Someone asked the question. Telly is right here. She's going to give us the question. I'll give you my answer. And yes, we're gonna do the rooting guide, man. I'm going down that downward spiral again. Telly, take it away.
At Jump Around asks on Twitter, what's your opinion on the Lions' playoff chances if they can survive the Packers?
I still think and thanks for the question, I still think the playoff chances are slim. There's a lot that we have to do, a lot of teams we have to jump over. I talked about this last podcast. The teams that we're facing, like the Eagles, now if we went out, there's nothing they could do to catch us. Same with if we went out, the Rams, the Saints who will be playing, those teams will be curtains. I think the NFC East is going to have one participant. We're fighting for a wild card. It's still very unlikely. Some things need to happen. I think the teams that I'm worried about the most would be Atlanta Falcons, Seattle, because we have to have a full game over Seattle because of losing straight up, and then Green Bay / Minnesota, whoever you think will win the division. So, it's 3.5 teams I think that primarily we have to concern ourselves with, but those aren't the only teams. You still got Tampa Bay at 5-5, and, so there are some considerations. I just think the chances are slim, but the more we win, obviously, the closer we'll be. I really, to be honest, because even though the upcoming games are easier, they're on the road, I won't really start thinking like, oh, whoa, wait a minute, we might have a chance, I would say, until we won 2 more games. We get to 6 and 7. That means we beat the Packers and we won a road game against another team that's kind of fighting for playoffs. At that point, in the very next game, we have a chance at going at 500. I would start to say, maybe there's a shot, because also at that point, teams will be winning, some will be losing. We'll have a clearer picture. I think if we could pull off these next 2, I'm gonna, some people will say I'm already on that playoff bandwagon. I'm not, trust me, but it has crossed my mind. 2 more wins, and I might be looking at the bandwagon, just sizing it up and potentially starting to step on it. So let's give you a rooting guide. Now, our game is out the way. It's 2 more games to go here Thursday, and then we have a slate of games Sunday and, of course, Monday night. So simply put, the rooting guide is as follows. If we want our team to have a shot at making the playoffs, it's not up to us. We don't control our own destiny. We have to win out, and we'll need some help. And so the help is these other teams losing, other teams beating certain teams that will help our cause. So let's go ahead and get into the rooting guide. I've got all the games that are kind of pertinent to us in the playoffs. Most of them will be involving an NFC team. So we want Carolina to defeat Dallas. Last time I looked, they were up handily, so that's good. Chicago and Green Bay is tricky. Because Chicago is 5-5. Green Bay kind of in the mix. I just feel like Chicago could falter quicker. So you want Chicago to win this game tonight, Thanksgiving night, because I think the Packers, you want them to lose as much, and it's going to be harder for them to lose, in my opinion. And so I'm going to say root for the Bears on that one, but that one's kind of like a 50-50 one. Minnesota versus Atlanta. Again, some will say, well, we want Minnesota to lose. I just don't think the division is a realistic opportunity. a realistic chance. And so I want Minnesota to just go ahead and win this game, beat Atlanta. I think we are more in a race with the Falcons at this point, who has the second wild card spot, than we are with the Minnesota Vikings in our division. So I'm rooting for the Minnesota Vikings to defeat the Atlanta Falcons. Then you have Cincinnati versus the Rams. You want Cincinnati to win that game, of course. Anytime it's, AFC versus NFC, those are pretty much no-brainers. You want the AFC team to be victorious. So we're rooting for the Bengals, Cincinnati, to defeat St. Louis. We're rooting for Houston, the Texans, who are at home, going up against the New Orleans Saints. We want them to win that one. You want the Colts to beat the Bucks. They're at home. That's a pretty big one because, like I said, the Bucks are 5-5. You want San Diego to beat Jacksonville. It gets kind of technical in terms of a record against teams you lost to and won to and all that. So that one isn't as obvious. And then you can root for Oakland as well against Tennessee to kind of strengthens one of the wins that we had. I know, guys, we're going down that road. Trust me, I'm not just like full on board thinking we're going to make the playoffs, but people are asking about it. And, hey, there's nothing wrong having the rooting guy. Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers before we get out of here. We're not going to size up, their rankings and this and that. We did all those quote unquote technical things just a couple of games ago. Now, we'll see what they're going to do against the Chicago Bears, how they're looking. I will say this, though. I would have liked to have seen us get that full week of rest. And then them play Sunday, and they have to work off of 4 days. But the schedulers, they want to make things convenient for the Packers, and that's fine. They're playing tonight. Now they did look pretty good against Minnesota, which to me said that our win had a little bit more credit because the Packers aren't completely horrible and yada yada. And so at this point, they're fighting for the division. They're fighting for a wild card, one or the other. They just want to get into the playoffs. Now, we always talk about streaks, right? And the last time the Packers won in Ford Field is the new streak. See, we kept talking about the whole Lambeau thing and Michael Jackson and this and that. Well, it's time for a new streak because we are on a very modest, but we're on a nice 2-game streak. And so the current streak is no longer Lambeau. Throw that out the way. The new streak is the last time the Green Bay Packers won at Ford Field. We got to go way, way back to 2012. That's right, man. I mean, that was so long ago. I got some stats for you because we love doing those cheesy, corny stats when talking about the last time, the Lions won in Lambeau. So I got some the other way around. The last time the Green Bay Packers beat the Detroit Lions in Ford Field, it was November 18th, 2012. The number one song was One More Night by Maroon 5. No, I'm not about to play Maroon 5 on my podcast. I'll just tell you the last time they won what the song was. The number one movie, it was Twilight Part 2, Breaking Dawn. No, I'm not about to play a sound clip of Twilight on my podcast. Yes, it is a streak, modest as it may be. If we win next week, it will continue again into 3 games. Seriously, guys, we have played them better at home. Even years where we struggled, 7-9 was kind of a lean year. Last year 11-5 was pretty good. Even years where we struggled, we've seemed to play them pretty good at Ford Field. Stafford had a very interesting quote at the beginning of the year. He said, simply put, I'm tired of splitting with the Green Bay Packers because a lot of years we would win at home and then lose on the road. And so I think what he was saying was, we got to get this win at Lambeau. He said he was tired of splitting. And so I know that's still in his mind and it's in his team's mind. I'm just going to give a prediction because you won't hear from me again until next Friday, and that game will be done and said for. I think we pull this one out, guys. 30-27 it's Thursday night. It's going to overtime. It's going to be a fun game, and the streak will continue. Dominance over the Packers at Ford Field. This was a fun one, guys. I did the whole I want you calling out the naysayers who saying it's bad that we keep winning. In all seriousness, I know everyone enjoyed this one because even the ones wanting the better draft pick and wanting to ensure that there's firings, at the end of the day, you're just a Lions fan. And you want what, in your opinion, would be the best for this team. And so, I joke and I try to call that out, and I sit here and say, you guys aren't real fans. We all root differently. So enjoy yourself. I know you got some time off. Maybe you're spending some time with family. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. Seriously, this has been a blast. The Detroit Sports Podcast Network it's been an amazing ride, and it's going to keep going. As always, DetroitSportsPodcast.com, iTunes for Android, guys. You don't have to go to iTunes. You can go to Podbay. So check us out. Subscribe. There's plenty of shows, plenty of fun. I'll be back next Friday. We have another Thursday night game. So you will hear from me once again. Next Friday, we'll be talking about Lions versus Packers. Hopefully it's another win, lose, or draw. We'll be right here, and I'll talk to you then.